Some men chase power, others take it by force. Maurice Mom Boucher didn't just rise through the ranks of the criminal world, he conquered it. He wasn't just another outlaw biker. He was a warlord, a man who ruled through fear, violence, and a ruthless code of loyalty. The making of a gangster. Maurice Boucher was born in 1953, the son of a construction worker. But unlike his father, who toiled for a modest living, Boucher wanted more. He wanted control. He wanted respect. Growing up in the working-class neighborhood of Pointe-aux-Trembles, Boucher saw firsthand what power meant. It wasn't about money, it was about fear. Those who commanded respect weren't the hard-working men with 9-to-5 jobs. They were the ones who took what they wanted. By his teens, Boucher was already on a dangerous path. Petty thefts turned into burglaries. Small fights turned into violent assaults. He wasn't just another street thug, he was a predator, learning how to survive in a world where weakness meant death. But street fights and robberies weren't enough. He wanted more. He wanted to be part of something bigger. Introduction to the outlaw world. Montreal in the 1970s was a battleground. The outlaw biker scene was exploding, with gangs fighting for dominance in drug trafficking, extortion, and organized crime. Boucher saw an opportunity. He first joined a local gang, the SS, but soon realized that to truly make a name for himself, he needed to be with the best. And there was only one club that had the reputation, the power, and the reach he wanted, the Hells Angels. Becoming a Hells Angel. Joining the Hells Angels isn't like signing up for a regular gang. It's a brotherhood, bound by blood, violence, and an unbreakable code of silence. And from that moment on, Mom Boucher wasn't just a criminal. He was part of something bigger, something deadlier. The Quebec Biker Wars, a reign of terror begins. The 1990s would go down in history as one of the bloodiest periods in Canada's underworld. The Quebec Biker Wars saw the Hells Angels go head-to-head with their rivals, the Rock Machine. And in a war where survival meant brutality, Boucher thrived. It wasn't just about drugs or territory anymore. It was a statement. Whoever controlled Quebec controlled the future of organized crime in Canada. Boucher didn't just participate in the war, he engineered it. He knew that the more blood was spilled, the more power he could consolidate. Under his leadership, the Hells Angels wiped out the competition, eliminating over 150 rival gang members, police informants, and defectors. But Boucher didn't just kill rivals. He sent a message to law enforcement. Stay out of our way. Crossing the line, the murders that shocked Canada. Boucher made a fatal mistake, one that would ultimately lead to his downfall. In 1997, he ordered the assassinations of 2 prison guards, Diane Levine and Pierre Rondeau. It was a move that shocked the nation. Killing rival gang members was one thing, but targeting law enforcement, that was an act of war. The beginning of the end. For years, Boucher had been untouchable, but no one can escape justice forever. In 2002, after an intense investigation, Mom Boucher was finally convicted of ordering the killings of the 2 prison guards. He was sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole for 25 years. But even behind bars, the empire he built was far from crumbling. Power is a cruel master. One moment, you're the king of the underworld. The next, you're just another prisoner. The trial, breaking an untouchable man. For years, Maurice Mom Boucher had evaded justice. His enemies were dead, his rivals crushed, and law enforcement had failed time and time again to put him away. But in 2002, everything changed. The evidence was overwhelming. Witnesses, wiretaps, and confessions all pointed to one man, Boucher. The jury's verdict? Guilty, life in prison, no parole for 25 years. He had walked into every courtroom before with the confidence of a man who knew the system couldn't touch him. Judges, lawyers, cops, he had outmaneuvered them all. But this time was different. This time the evidence was airtight. The witnesses weren't nameless ghosts. The jury didn't flinch. The gavel didn't hesitate. And as the words "life in prison" echoed through the chamber, the empire he had built with blood and fire began to crumble, piece by piece, brick by brick. The courtroom was silent, but outside, the world was roaring. News outlets plastered his name across every headline. The streets he once ruled whispered about his fate, and his enemies, they celebrated. He had built his empire on fear, on absolute control. But control is an illusion when you're in chains. His final walk out of that courtroom wasn't just a fall from power, it was a funeral for the man he used to be. The same streets that once feared him moved on. New names took his place. The machine kept running, and for the first time in decades, Boucher was just another prisoner. Prison, the fortress he couldn't escape. For a man who had controlled the streets, being locked away was a new kind of hell. But if anyone thought Boucher would fade into the background, they were wrong. Boucher knew that power didn't come from where you were. It came from who you controlled. And from the moment he stepped into prison, he began building a new empire. Even in prison, Boucher was untouchable. He commanded loyalty, fear, and a network that extended far beyond those prison walls. The empire cracks, betrayals and arrests. With their theater behind bars, cracks begin to show in the Hells Angels' once unshakable foundation. The men who had once sworn loyalty to Boucher began questioning his rule. And then came the biggest betrayal of all. I was loyal to Boucher until I realized he saw us all as pawns. He made us believe we were untouchable, but in the end, he was just using us. One by one, the men closest to Boucher began to turn. Deals were made, testimonies were given, and a wave of arrests followed. The assassination attempt when power fails. By 2010, Boucher was no longer the kingpin he once was. His influence was waning, and new criminals were rising in the ranks. But in the underworld, there is one rule that never changes. Weakness invites attack. Someone had finally tried to take down Mom Boucher, and though he survived the attack, the message was clear. His time was over. Life in solitary, the end of an era. For years, he ruled with an iron fist. Now, his world was reduced to a 6x9 cell, with nothing but memories of the empire he once built. The story of Mom Boucher is a reminder of one simple truth. Power is fleeting, and no man, no matter how ruthless, can outrun the past forever. Legacy, what remains of the Montreal underworld. Though Boucher is gone, the underworld he helped shape remains. The biker gangs still control much of Canada's organized crime, but the landscape has shifted. Boucher's reign ended in prison, but the lessons he left behind still shape the streets. Fear, loyalty, and violence. These are the currencies of the underworld. And as long as men seek power, there will always be another Mom Boucher waiting to rise. History repeats itself. The names may change, but the game remains the same.